10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. That's right. This is the No Soundbites Allowed podcast, and we are on the Exceptional Conservative Network, TECN TV. I thank you for joining me today in our 2-hour episode, which will be going, this is our long episode. We take comments from you. We look forward to seeing the audience here. And if you're here live with us, we obviously want to get your feedback. This is about a conversation with you. And one of the great things we're going to have today, in addition to speaking about many of the issues that are important, is we're going to be talking with Sheriff Richard Mack, a Second Amendment advocate, talking about his Neighborhood Alliance PAC. We're going to be talking about the Second Amendment. We're going to be talking about the red flag situation in Congress. So we have a lot of information we're going to go over today. And I am checking out the chat room. I do see that Tina's there with us already, and many others are joining. So we'll be looking forward to speaking with all of you. And in addition to that, of course, we have a lot of issues to go over today, but I did want to thank everyone for being here first. And I do want to say, I appreciate each and every time, the entire audience, all of you. Whether you're seeing the show live, whether you see it when it's taped on YouTube or on Facebook or on Twitter, it doesn't matter how you see it. Your support by liking this, by sharing this, by commenting is always important. And that's why we want to be able to reach out to you, because you make it all worthwhile. You're the reason why I do it. You really are. It's the only reason to be in politics or to have political commentary week after week. But I do want to take a break from the normal pace of things. There's been a lot going on personally for me in the last 2 weeks. It's been a very, very difficult time, very trying and troubling. But I understand many of us go through periods of time where a lot of things in life don't go right, and we have personal troubles, we have personal trials and tribulations. And, whenever I get into these situations, they happen to us from time to time in life. I know some people take the wrong path. They look at it in a very dark way. They look at it as everything is wrong or not possible, and they don't know a way out. And that's sometimes where we see that people they'll take the wrong choice, and they harm themselves. Either directly or indirectly, whether it's with drugs or other things, or suicide. And that's something, don't ever go down that path. It's the wrong path every time. There's always an answer. There's always a better way. You may not see it right this second, but it's there. And it's important. Reach out to people. Reach out to people you call your friends, your family. And there are helplines out there. Reach out to them and get that help that you need, and persevere. Because one thing that I've been through fires, I've been through floods, I've been through civil wars, earthquakes, attempted coups, motorcycle accidents. I've had a lot of problems besides, the emotional crap that I'm going through right now. And I can tell you, given time, it will get better. Something will change, and there's something positive will happen. And that's an important thing to keep in mind. And I did want to share that with everyone, because I know it's been a very difficult and trying time for me personally. And so, and a lot of difficulty and a lot of burned bridges, Moabs to the bridge. But, that's just part of life. And we do try and move on. And to top it all off, I also had my water heater die yesterday. So, it's when it rains, it pours, and it feels like everything is going against you, that everything is beating up on you, and there is no way out. But I can tell you, There is. You can fix the water heater, hopefully, and help if you can. But if the water heater, the light turning off, mortgages, bills, we all have these things. And sometimes it all feel like everything's all at once. It's all coming down on you. Be strong. Take a deep breath. Focus on one thing and accomplish that one thing. And then go to the next. And then to the next. One after another, because we can only really do one thing at a time. Take that moment. Take that time. Take that deep breath. Talk to your friends and to anyone that you need to reach out to. And it will get better. And you will be better. And it seems like Tina agrees with me. She thinks it's great advice, so I'm glad. So a little bit somber, a little bit difficult, and if my voice sounds a little off, if I look a little tired or sad, that's the reason why. It's been, like I said, it's been a very difficult 2 weeks. But we persevere, and I'm here because even with that challenge, with the difficult 2 weeks, guess where I am? I'm here with you because you make it worthwhile. You're my bright spot. This is the one thing I want to get done every week, is to talk with you 3 times a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1 p.m., on Saturdays from 12 to 2, to talk about the issues that are affecting us all in politics. That's why I'm here, because you're important to me and you make a difference. With that, let me get into the show proper and talk about some of the things that we're going to be going over today. Now, obviously, as I mentioned, Sheriff Richard Mack is going to be coming on at about 12:30. We'll be talking with him. So there's a lot of stuff there. Obviously, we have the Senate meeting that just happened about 2.5 days ago, with the Senate taking a hearing on the red flag situation. It was a big deal. And, just prior to that, actually that was on Tuesday. And just prior to that, I had put out where is it? There it is. I had wrote an article, and I do suggest you may want to look this up. This is on the Voss Political Commentary, the MVASS website. And it's an article, an op-ed, on the 8 reasons why red flags don't work. And I think it's a pretty decent article. For people who are not familiar, I've been working I'm a Second Amendment advocate, and I've been doing this a long time, talking about it, fighting against things like the New York SAFE Act and some storage laws that are being passed out there that are really not advantageous. But the red flag is particularly dangerous, because of the cost in manpower and dollars, the criminals and the deranged having no impact on this whatsoever. The fact that it doesn't stop suicides, which is one of the things it's supposed to be doing. That they're looking at the wrong people, and it doesn't stop anything. It allows the state, whatever state you're in, and if it becomes national, the government to take your children. It's led to a person dying, and probably will lead to others dying as well. It turns our teachers into spies and law enforcement, and it is cruel and unusual punishment. Check out the article and look it over for yourself. There's links within the article to sources on where we find that information, as well as you can see some of the other research that I've done in my over 150 sources that I've been following for the last 9 months, actually a year now, on the red flag laws and what their impact really is. And so I do suggest that it may be something of interest for people. We'll be talking about that with Sheriff Mack. Separate of that, and there's a few things here, and we're going to get more into it later in the show, but obviously one of the things I want to talk about is a poll that I did. And you may recall I put that out on March 28th, and basically the poll says, former Vice President Joe Biden, Beto O'Rourke, Alan Howe, even on a local level, my councilman, Conrad Taylor, each and every one of them, so many more, apologize for being white. It's part of the gender and identity politics central to the 2020 presidential platform. Is this racist? Is it positive for America? What do you think? That was the question that I asked, which is a very big question, and I want to go over that poll and talk at some length about that. And let's talk about the what I believe is an undercurrent of racism and categorization and sexism that's in our politics right now. And it's pretty crazy because you would think that's not what people want. Now, I do want to refer back to the poll. So in the poll, and this is on my Facebook page, the Voss Political Commentary. You can check it out for yourself. The poll is still up, and you can answer it. We know that it should be up for another 5 days, and already we've had over 209 people who've seen this. 17 people have answered, though. But oops, I don't want to show who, sorry. Of the 17 people who answered this, every single person has come out and said that this is a racist philosophy. This is a racist ideology. And that is important. And it's important because it's scary. It is absolutely scary when you think about it, because, and we'll go into this in some depth, but there was a poll released on March 28th by Quinnipiac University, one of their polls, and in that poll on March 28th, they asked, or they mentioned that Joe Biden is on top of the Democratic presidential PAC. The Quinnipiac University National Poll finds most voters say they definitely won't vote for Trump. That's the people they're asking. But here's the big thing. In the poll, they asked, and they've received answers from Democrats that say 72% believe that political ideology is important in the 2020 presidential race. Another 71% say that standing up to Republicans is important. Meanwhile, 67% say that bipartisanship is important, which I don't know how you can stand up to Republicans and be bipartisan at the same time. But this poll also shows that 84% of the Democrats asked in this poll said that, and specifically 75% of those who were black in the poll, race is not important. The thing to keep here, 25% do believe it's important. 13% of Democrats in general do believe it's important. But overall, they say race isn't important. Another 84% say that gender is not important. Now, when you say that and balance that with the fact that just this week we've had Beto O'Rourke, we've had Joe Biden, each come out and say that they want to apologize for being white. And Alan Howe, who I was speaking about on Thursday, on the Thursday program, we were going over his presidential run. He's a presidential candidate, one of the unnamed 30 or so presidential candidates. And he's out of Pennsylvania. His claim to fame is that he lost in a primary amongst Democrats in fourth place, getting 4,000 votes for the Pennsylvania 10th Congressional District. And he is full on a believer of gender and identity politics. And he apologizes for being white as well. So we have three, clearly in the last week, we've got about three of the major candidates, Beto O'Rourke, Joe Biden, leaders in this Democratic 2020 presidential race. And each and every one of them are saying that race is a massive factor, and more importantly, that they are apologizing for their race, for the way they were born, for something that is absolutely intrinsic in their lives. And this is something we see across the Democratic Party. We're seeing that with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the Democratic Socialists, the far left, We're talking about groups like Citizen Action, Political Leaders of Tomorrow, Antifa, Black Lives Matters. Race and identity, gender, are massively important things. But yet when you poll the average rank and file Democrat, they're telling you that race is not important. So either that's a disconnect with the leadership of the Democratic Party, of the people who are running for president, or people are lying to the polls. Maybe a little bit of both. But something's going on here. Because why should anyone apologize for the race that they were born with? According to my very informal poll, as I said, on Facebook, we have 100% of all people who actually responded saying that it's racist. And I agree. It's completely racist. And that's not a poll that's set up. It's not, there's no trap to that. It's not a trick question. And I understand why so many people would look at it and be interested in the poll and share the poll, but yet didn't want to answer it. Because so many people have been trained at this point. We've been reminded through the news media over and over again that no, you can't say anything that might be considered racist. We can't say anything that would offend somebody. We have to be very PC aware. And if you're not, or if you say something that someone doesn't agree with, well, guess what? You're going to be labeled a racist. You're going to be silenced. You're going to be ostracized. You're going to be punished because you have an idea, a viewpoint that someone else doesn't agree with. That is a massive problem in our politics today. And I haven't really even gotten into this. This is just on the surface. There's more about this that we should really be addressing. But let's actually consider that. I cannot understand how it cannot be understood as implicitly racist to say that you are so upset with yourself and your existence that you would apologize for being born the way you were born. I had that conversation with my local Councilman Conrad Taylor, who happens to be, at the time, he was about 20. One of the youngest members of council in all of the history of my region, Binghamton, New York. And it shocked me that he would say, no, I apologize to you. He apologized to me. I have it on tape. This is audio from my podcast back when I first started it 4 years ago. And yeah, he's apologizing because he's white. Why? I had to ask him, why? Why would you be sorry for that? That's the person you are. That's how you were born. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you're Hispanic, if you're Chinese, you're Asian, you're black, white, I don't care. Okay, that's the skin you were born with. Whether it's a good tan, a bad tan, no tan, I don't care. Why should we care? Why does that become important? Why is that a factor? I listen to people say that Michelle Obama, you know what, she would be great because she's a black woman. We heard the same thing, I think it was a year ago, actually in January. Yeah, a year ago in January, I was doing an article about Oprah Winfrey because she was lauded at the time to be a front runner for the 2020 presidential race. And the question I had for people is, besides the fact that she's black and she's rich and a Democrat, what makes her worthwhile? And the answer was, well, she's black and a woman. That's all it takes? Is that the reason? I'm sorry. We really should have higher expectations for any elected official. To say that, well, I'm this color or I'm this gender, I have a sexual preference. Those are all personal things that have absolutely nothing to do with, are you intelligent, are you capable, and do you have the qualifications for the job? Do you know anything about it? We can get a trained monkey to wear a suit. That doesn't mean that should be running a business, let alone a nation. I'm sorry, this is, well, I'm not sorry, and that's just something that We hear a lot these days. People say, I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. I am not sorry that I am black or Hispanic. I am not sorry that you aren't, or maybe you are. I'm not sorry that I'm a man. I'm not sorry for people who are men, women, whatever you may be. That is you. My God, I'm starting to sound like Mr. Rogers. We really need to have Mr. Rogers on during prime time, repeats of Mr. Rogers in prime time, so people can see that and listen to that man talk about how you're wonderful being you. You're the only you out there. I'm going back 50 years in my life quoting, by the way, Mr. Rogers, great man. Great man. I wish he was still alive. And I truly do mean we should probably have his show on, which is meant for children, and we should have it playing on prime time because obviously enough kids did not see PBS and see his program while he was alive. And Tina's buzzing at me here because I'm not paying attention. So let me answer. Tina, you said it's total bullshit. Oh, really, Tina? Okay. I didn't. We got to watch the language there. It's kind of pathetic that people think their sexual preference, color, gender, etc., is the one most distinguishable character someone has. I mean, isn't honesty, integrity, good work ethic, kindness, and common sense much more important and qualifying for most jobs rather than having a genital parts of a male or female, or being a certain color? And yes, that's absolutely true. And I agree, Tina. You know, I don't care. These are intrinsic things. You have a body. You're a human being. Okay. We all are. We're all human beings. We have certain parts. We have a certain skin. That doesn't make you good or bad. It doesn't make you intrinsically anything besides a human being. It's what you do with that body, with that mind, that makes it important. And I have to go back to, well, I'm sorry. I need to go back and ask, because the poll, I mean, let's look at the poll, because I think most people in America would agree. I would say easily 84% of America would agree that race is not important. That 84% of America would say that gender is not important. I do believe that. But it troubles me when 72% of Democrats are saying that a political ideology is important, and that we're listening to their candidates stand on a platform that is absolutely dependent on your race and your identity, and the fear of someone saying you're a racist or you're a sexist. That's it. They are trading on the fear. This is absolutely fear-mongering. When you have to worry about someone turning around and saying you're sexist, you're racist, guess what? Then you're being restricted. Your freedom of speech, your freedom of expression, your freedom of thought is being challenged and controlled. You are being denied. And that is the problem. That is the major problem. And I really, I can't tell you how much I am troubled by this. I don't have the words for it. But this is the first part of the show, and I always love the feedback, and thank you, Tina, for the feedback there. We're going to be talking a lot more, but in a few moments, we're going to be taking a quick break, and we should have Sheriff Richard Mack coming on to the program, and we're going to have a great time speaking with him. We're going to be talking about the Neighborhood Alliance PAC and his work to be helping communities to fight against dangers, criminals, deranged, to be able to protect people. We're also going to be talking probably about one of his other groups, which is the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. And of course, we'll be talking about, the red flag legislation pending in Congress, as well as other gun control measures, which seem to be actually all the gun control measures of the last 30 years. All the restrictions that have been put out there haven't worked. That is a fact. They keep adding more, none of them work. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back in just a moment.
You tell me you're different. You say you got some things and you're working on it. Oh, but I never listen. No, was too busy thinking you're the perfect one. It's such a mystery, 'cause usually I'm looking for a reason to stay. But who would have believed that here I be and I just can't look away. Oh, you tried to give me a warning, say watch your step before you fall too hard. You tell me I'm crazy, I say not crazy enough, but I'm crazy for you, crazy, crazy about us. And I know that it's true, baby, it may be too much, but I'm crazy for you, crazy, crazy in love. Get if you're thinking you're alone and now you feel. I wanna show you the difference. If you let me, I could show you something real. It's such a mystery, 'cause usually I'm looking for a reason to stay. Oh, yeah. But who would have believed that here I be and I just can't look away. Oh, you tried to give me a warning, say watch your step before you fall too hard. You tell me I'm crazy, I say not crazy enough, but I'm crazy for you, crazy, crazy about us. And I know that it's true, baby, it may be too much, but I'm crazy for you, crazy, crazy in love. Never giving up, never giving up, never giving up up on you. Never giving up, never giving up, never giving up, never giving up on you. Never giving up, never giving up, never giving up, never giving up on you. Never giving up, I'm crazy for you. Never giving up on you. You tried to give me a warning, say watch your step before you fall too hard. You tell me I'm crazy, I say not crazy enough, but I'm crazy for you, crazy, crazy about us. And I know that it's true, baby, it may be too much, but I'm crazy for you, crazy, crazy in love. Never giving up, never giving up, never giving up, never giving up on you. Never giving up, never giving up, never giving up, never giving up on you. Never giving up, never giving up, never giving up, never giving up on you. Never giving up, never giving up, never giving up, never giving up on you.
Hey everybody, always good to be back with you. I'm still waiting, have not heard from Sheriff Mack yet. We are expecting him at 12. Well, it's 12:30, so he should be calling in at any moment. And once he does, we'll get him right onto the line. I did want to take a moment just to say, give a shout out to friends of mine over at the Belmar Pub. And if you're not familiar with the Belmar Pub, it's actually a great location. If you happen to be in the southern tier of New York in the Binghamton region, do stop on in. This is not, let me say this directly, this is not a paid advertising. They are friends of mine. I know the owners and many of the people working there. They're friends of mine. I enjoy them. And so if you do drop by, go ahead, check out the Belmar Pub. I just wanted to give them a quick shout out there. In case you were wondering, the beginning music, the band at the beginning was the Adam Ate the Apple. My friend Dan Polkorak and the entire band, great friends. They've given us the rights to be able to put on their music, so that's why you get to hear them sometimes. As well as Matt Cornwell, who you just saw in his video. He's a great artist as well, can sometimes be found at the Belmar. Actually, both of them play at the Belmar from time to time. And you can check them out and see them live. And I think they're even better live than in some of their videos. So I just wanted to give them a quick shout out. With that said, nope, didn't get that call. Okay. So let's move forward. Now, obviously, I want to talk a little bit about the red flag laws and what's going on in Congress. So let's and set this up for when Sheriff Mack does call in. And it's important to know that there's just so much wrong with the red flag legislation. It's such a problem, such an issue with this, because these laws, these red flag laws, this legislation talking about gun control, my big problem with it, well, there's a couple of big problems actually, but let me start with this. Besides destroying your Second Amendment right, and that's important, because the Second Amendment is the foundation that all the other amendments stand on. You don't have a freedom to speak if someone can walk up and kill you, which they do in Venezuela, in North Korea, in China, and they used to do it throughout the Soviet Union. And you see it in many nations around the world. In Darfur, as an example. So you can't speak in many nations around the world without threat of being killed just for voicing your opinion. That goes without saying that you can be killed in many parts of the world because of your sexual preference. If you're trans or not. You can be killed for your religion. I mean, Darfur is a great example. And there's been an entire genocide going on there for decades because of people's religion. We know that just in the last week and a half, there's been, 140 Christians murdered in Nigeria? Not that the press is talking about it, but yeah. And people are denied in looking at New Zealand, which was all of the rage last week. And what we find is that when we're looking at these situations, people don't have the ability to fight back, to protect themselves, either from a deranged or crazy individual or from a government. And when people do not have that ability to protect themselves, to defend their property, their lives, their loved ones, you get oppression and you get more people who die. And yeah, is it smaller? We don't see genocides like Darfur in Australia or Great Britain or the United States. True. But tens of thousands of people get killed in murders every year. How many people die in Chicago just last year? 2,500? 3,500? Every year. So far this year, I believe the number is 87 people since January that have been murdered in Chicago. Another 120, 140 people who've been shot, wounded, injured in Chicago. And they have every single gun legislation you can think of. They have more gun restrictions and gun control laws than pretty much, as far as I remember, anywhere in the nation. And they have the highest number of people killed and injured in the nation. Vermont has the least regulations, the least intervention by government, the least restriction on the Second Amendment. And guess what? They're one of the safest spots in the entire nation. So is it the problem of the firearm? Because the same types of firearms exist in Vermont that exist in Chicago. What's the difference? Maybe because when you start denying people the ability to defend themselves, criminals take advantage of it. The deranged take advantage of it. You know, I'm working on a book, and this is probably the first time most people have heard about this, but I am writing a book. I'm about 40,000 words in, and it'll probably be something like 150,000 words. I'm somewhere around 40,000 words right now. And I was just going over it. And do you ever notice that as we talk, every time you see this cycle start, there's some incident, and whether it's about a firearm or not, it comes back to a firearm, and it always circles around, like the attacks in Nice in France, where a guy was driving with his car and attacking people. How about Ohio State in 2015, where a crazy guy was driving around in a car and stabbing people with a knife in a mass murder attempt? These things are, they don't get the same kind of headlines as, say, the Parkland shooter, but it's the same kind of deranged criminal that's causing these. So is it the problem of the firearm, or is it the problem of deranged and crazy people? And I think that's a very big thing to talk about. And I think it's a very clear and different understanding. Because if we don't understand that, then we make the wrong decision. And I think red flags are the wrong decision. Because at the end of a day, when you're dealing with red flag legislation, you always wind up talking about taking away someone's rights. Some of them, all of them. With a red flag legislation, you're talking about taking away the right to cruel and unusual punishment, the Eighth Amendment. And not a lot of people always talk about that. I know even myself, in speeches that I've had with hundreds, if not dozens of people or hundreds of people talking about this, when I've been on the radio talking about this, when I've been at various events, most people point to, looking at red flag legislation or gun control and gun restriction legislation. They'll always point to, it's taking away your Second Amendment right. In reference to the red flag laws, they'll point to the due process, the Fifth and 15th Amendments. They may even talk about the Fourth Amendment, like with storage laws. How is the government going to know whether you're storing your firearm properly if they don't come into your home and check? These are important things, and I agree. But one of the things that almost no one talks about is, what about the Eighth Amendment? Cruel and unusual. And I'll give you a great example with the red flag legislation. The red flag action starts and is acted on because someone says so. There's no proof. There is no crime. And almost always the government's going to go forward with this and give a warrant. Almost every single case, I believe it's over 90% of all red flag actions wind up with a warrant being given to police officers, and those police officers then turn around and show up at someone's house at 5 in the morning, usually between 5 and 7 a.m., when they know people are usually home and usually asleep. And they burst down doors and they take every firearm, and then they take the kids. But here's the thing, and this is what's the cruel part about this, cruel and unusual. They're going to take your property. They're going to take your kids. but you never committed a crime. You never committed a crime. You didn't do anything. You owned a firearm. Someone else didn't like the way you acted. Now, that could be because a teacher saw your kid in school and your kid scraped their knee or was having a bad day because you didn't buy them the latest Nintendo toy. And that teacher, in seeing that, has to turn around and say, well, this could be a problem at the home, and that home has firearms, so we need to take the kids and the firearms. That's how red flags work. I know what people have told you when we saw them in Congress over at the Senate meeting, which was Tuesday the 26th, and we heard the members of the Senate Judiciary talking with the public, talking with some of the notable individuals there, Mr. Ronald Honberg, Amanda Wilcox, Sheriff Rick Bradshaw, Ms. Kimberly Wyatt, and Mr. David Kopel. We saw when they were having that conversation with these individuals, and you can go and see this. This is over at the Senate Judiciary page, and you can look this up for yourself and watch the show, or you can go to C-SPAN on it. But what we saw in that meeting were people saying, hey, we agree. This is a great idea. They forgot to ask a question. Is this cruel and unusual punishment for someone who has not broken a law? Is this cruel and unusual punishment because someone accused you of being a danger? I mean, it's one of those questions that almost no one ever asks. It almost never happens. And yet, there we are. I don't know. It's something that, and I ask this of you. Do you believe that's cruel and unusual? Does it make sense? And I'm sorry, I'm just checking on the sheriff and his schedule. And so I have to wonder about this. I mean, how does it not violate the 8th Amendment when we know for a fact that no crime is committed? That 90% of all the, hang on one second. Excuse me, folks. I'm finding out about the sheriff. We're trying to find out where I apologize for the silence there. Just talking about where the sheriff is, and he's been delayed a little bit. And so we're just checking on that. And we're going to get him onto the program as soon as possible. But I mean, that's a really good question. And that's one of the things that I believe the sheriff can answer for us, or give us some further insight from a law enforcement perspective. Because you never hear this. In the entire time that the Senate Judiciary had these experts in front of them, and the entire time that they're asking questions, in the entire bill that they're considering, not once is the question asked, is this cruel or unusual? And that's really an amazing thing. But I want you to think about that, and we're going to take another quick break, and then we'll be right back. I believe I have the ability to contact... Oh, and give me 1 second, folks. Hello?
Some people live for fortune. Some people live just for the fame. Yeah. Some people live for the power. Yeah. Some people live just to play the game. Some people think that the physical things define what's within.
Hello, everybody. We are back, and we did get in touch with Sheriff Richard Mack. He's on the phone with us right now, and you should be able to hear us. Can you hear us there, Sheriff?
Michael, I think I can hear you okay. Thanks.
All right. I hear you perfect as well. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Just to let people know, the sheriff is working on, there's an incident that's ongoing. And so that's part of why he was delayed in reaching us. And I do understand if things get a little more active there, we may lose you. So I do understand. You with me, Sheriff?
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay. So, Sheriff, a couple things. For people who are not familiar with you, can you tell us a little bit about your background? I always like to hear it from the horse's mouth directly.
Well, yeah, that's quite a story in and of itself. But I grew up the son of an FBI agent, and I tried to get in the FBI. That didn't work out. So while I was working my way through college, I was a part-time cadet at the police department in Provo, Utah, and decided to stay on there full time, and tried to make myself more attractive to the FBI while I was working law enforcement. Then I decided to stay there. I really loved the department. I loved the work, and I did a stint as an undercover narcotics agent back in 1982. My career really shot up after that. I was promoted to school resource officer, and then after that, corporal, front desk sergeant, detective, patrol sergeant, public relations officer, and then after that, in 1988, I moved home to Arizona and ran for sheriff and was elected twice. And in 1994, I started a movement to fight the Brady Bill. The Brady Bill is the first law in history where the federal government and the president attempted to commandeer sheriffs across the country for federal bidding to enforce the Brady handgun control law. And I said, there's two things wrong with the Brady Bill. One, it's gun control, and I took an oath to oppose gun control when I said I would uphold and defend the Constitution. Second, the federal government doesn't have any authority or power to tell your sheriff what to do. Your sheriff does not work for the federal government. He does not take orders from Congress or the president. He works for the people of his respective county. And 6 other sheriffs joined me in that lawsuit. We went all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and we won. After that, I lost my third bid to be sheriff. And after that, I went on the lecture circuit. I wrote 8 books. And now I'm a high school teacher, and I'm an activist for freedom, and I chair the Neighborhood Alliance PAC, which is trying to get the nation to focus on arming our schools with teachers, with volunteers, former special ops, or former military people, former cops. It doesn't matter. We need to arm our schools, and that's what I'm about now.
All right. And thank you for that summary and catching us up with what's been going on. You've had quite the life, very much an active supporter of the Second Amendment, and we thank you for that, and protecting our rights. I know that you have a very absolute position on the Second Amendment, that the government cannot tell us we cannot defend ourselves, our homes, and our families. And I applaud that. I agree with you on that. I do want to talk about the Neighborhood Alliance PAC in just a moment, but one of the things that I've been talking about, and I'm a major advocate of the Second Amendment as well, and I'm very much against these red flag laws. I'm not sure, did you see or have you read about the Senate Judiciary hearing on a national red flag law?
Well, there's been so many going on in states. I'm not sure which one that one is, but there's so many attempts. And as you probably know, there's 22,000 gun control laws in our country, 99% of them unconstitutional. Congress has no authority whatsoever to regulate the Second Amendment or to regulate that which is guaranteed in the Bill of Rights. So it never ceases to amaze me how unconstitutional our own Congress is. But the red flag laws going on in Washington, New Mexico, Maryland, and Nevada have sheriffs there, constitutional sheriffs that are standing against it and who have come out publicly, even written, a few of them have written letters to their governors and other public officials saying that they are not going to enforce these unconstitutional gun laws. And that's what really part of the movement that I started. In fact, I started entirely the constitutional sheriff movement. And we need more constitutional peace officers and sheriffs in this country to do just that, because we have legislatures throughout the country, our own federal Congress and our state legislatures as well, who simply refuse to follow the Constitution, not just regarding the Second Amendment, but many other issues as well, but primarily the Second Amendment. And so which one you're talking about right now, I'm sure I've heard of it, but I cannot put my finger on the precise one you're mentioning.
Not a problem. Many of them they all have the same core ideology with different additions to it or subtractions. Essentially, we're talking about the ability of an individual or law enforcement to say someone is a danger to themselves and or their community, and because of that, to receive a warrant to take their property, and as a consequence, to take the children out of the home since it's too dangerous, even though no crime has ever been committed. That's the core of all red flag legislation.
Yes, I did hear about that one. Yes, I absolutely did. And it's just frightening to see legislators who have no clue what they're talking about actually put law enforcement in that position. And another thing that's very difficult, if not impossible, and in some states illegal, for law enforcement to access mental history records.
Oh, yes.
It actually was against the law in Arizona. I don't think they've changed it since then. But when I was sheriff and they came out with the Brady Bill, we were supposed to, according to the Brady Bill, check all criminal history and mental history records. Well, at the time, those were protected, and it was against the law, and so our own federal government was trying to get us to break the law, and so that was another thing I refused to do. I wasn't going to break the law for them, and we all know how Janet Reno and Bill Clinton didn't care if you violated the law, because their agenda for gun control, they wanted to convince everybody that that was more important. So it's really difficult for law enforcement to make that determination. And it's really difficult for law enforcement also to just follow the whims of a CPS officer, CPS agent, who they're not police officers, and yet they want us to just go and do whatever they say, and we don't work for them. And so if a counselor or a doctor or, like I said, a CPS worker, if they want us to go and enter a home just on their say-so, that puts us again in a very precarious position, and it opens us up for a lot of civil liability that we simply cannot afford. And so we're taking law enforcement to the next level of trying to enforce these rules and regulations, and we really have no business doing so.
Let me ask you, Sheriff Mack, in your knowledgeable experience, and especially with your work with the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, which has helped to put well over 120 counties across the country fighting against these kinds of unconstitutional laws for gun restrictions. Let me ask you, especially in reference to the red flag legislation, one of my arguments against it is that this is a violation of the Eighth Amendment. It's a violation of the cruel and unusual punishment. What do you think?
Well, the Eighth Amendment, I think, is one of the most forgotten and ignored amendments in the entire Constitution. Because I think if law enforcement actually paid attention to it, that we would see the other part of that amendment that you just quoted, and that is excessive fines and bail.
Yes, that's true.
I think that if we actually adhered to the Eighth Amendment, we would have to diminish by about 90% the traffic citations we issue, because they are excessive in the frequency that we write them, and they're excessive, way excessive, in the amount of the actual fine involved, especially if you get cited for anything in California. You're looking at on the average, the average ticket in California is about $700.
Ow.
And in Arizona, a simple speeding ticket is about $275.
That hurts too.
And I believe all that is excessive, and especially for young people who are just starting out in life and trying to get a job, and average families who are just living paycheck to paycheck, and then you get some police officer writing a $275 ticket, and especially the tickets that are so unconstitutional, that are photo radar and photo red light tickets, where the officer who goes to court to, if you contest the ticket, which I suggest everybody does, if you do contest the ticket, then an officer is there testifying who was not even there and did not see the violation occur. And you have a right to face your accusers as guaranteed in the Constitution. So we continuously, in order to make our police revenue collectors instead of peacekeepers and guards of the Constitution and guards of the Republic, we keep turning them into revenue agents. And that's one of the things that actually motivated me to run for sheriff, because I was so sick and tired of being in an apartment that everything was numbers oriented instead of people oriented and freedom oriented. And that's really where we're at today. The entire law enforcement community has been brainwashed into believing that our job is to kick in doors, arrest everybody we can, arrest all the potheads and drug users, fill up our prisons, and write as many tickets as we can, and then we're doing our job. We're supposed to be service-oriented. We are here to protect and serve, and we're here to serve the people, not be their taskmasters and tax collectors, but we're here to really serve them and protect their individual liberties. And we just have gotten so far away from that, and that's why I hope that all your listeners will get involved with us at the CSPOA, because I'm telling you, the sheriffs that are standing right now are doing so because they have heard from their constituents, and the constituents know what we're doing at the CSPOA. And so, yes, I highly encourage you and all your listeners to become members of the CSPOA, and you can do that at CSPOA.org. Stands for Constitutional Sheriffs Peace Officers Association, CSPOA.org.
Okay. And I'm glad that you brought that up, and I do have it on the screen, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that in just a moment. I also, while we have you, and since it is something that you did just start, and it's kind of an offshoot of what you had done in the past, which is the Neighborhood Alliance PAC. Now, you have a very unique perspective as a former member of law enforcement, a current high school teacher. There's obviously a big discussion throughout the nation about how to best protect children. And I know that the Parkland shooting, there was a report done on they spent a year doing an analysis. It came out in January, late December or January. And their analysis said that there should be an increase in the number of service resource officers, and they should be armed. What do you see as an answer, and how does the Neighborhood Alliance PAC help to make our children safer?
Well, we wonderful to create a dialogue in the country with all police agencies and sheriff's offices, between the schools and the communities, parents, teachers, and students alike. As a matter of fact, I'd really like to talk to some of these students who started campaigning for more gun control, who are literally brainwashed into believing that more gun control is going to keep us safer. And nothing could be further from the truth. And I'd really like to be able to sit down with them and discuss that with them. Because even if you were able to create some sort of gun control and make a law, let's say, Michael, let's say we make a law tomorrow to get rid of AR-15.
Right.
Does anybody know logistically how long that would take us to accomplish that feat? There's no way that you're going to ever get rid of all of them.
No.
There's no way you're going to get them away from the criminal element in our society. They're not going to turn them in. For police or police agencies to pretend to the public, or for politicians to pretend to the public that we can go out door to door and confiscate these weapons so that everybody's going to be safer. You're looking at, even if you could do any of that, you're looking 2 to 5 years to even get it started. And then in the meantime, are we going to be preventing or decreasing the amount of shootings we're having in public places, and specifically our schools? That it's not an immediate solution. It's not going to take effect immediately. There's no way it can decrease shootings. And then what if they got rid of all assault rifles, that they call it? Okay, so then let's say only pistols can be used for any of these types of shootings. You're going to still have the shootings.
Oh, yeah.
So the only way you can get rid of the shootings or decrease the shootings is to get rid of all guns. And that's really what their intent is, but it's still not going to happen. There's over 350 million guns in America. You're not going to get rid of them. You can't even keep them out of prisons or jails or courtrooms or schools.
True.
There's just no way logistically that you can go and pick up all these guns. Okay, but I'm willing to listen to any of these students and people who say that that's going to keep us safer. Okay, so how about let's look at the history and the facts, Michael?
I agree.
And I know that you're aware of a lot of this, but let's go over the facts. Start with the shootings that started in the 80s, work your way up to the present time, and examine all of the horrendous shootings that we've had. You could look at the one in New Zealand recently. You can look at the one in Las Vegas last year. You can look at Parkland. You can look at Sandy Hook in Connecticut. You can look at Columbine in Denver. You can just look at all of them. Every single time, it produced 4 results from the shooter, from this heinous, coward nutcase. In every case, that's what they are.
Yes.
Especially cowards.
Yes.
That they know they're going to be shooting at people who cannot defend themselves. Every single time, 4 things happen. As soon as they hear that the police are there or a citizen is there with a gun, as soon as they see or hear that somebody's coming after them with a gun, they either shoot themselves, engage the police or the citizen and get shot and usually killed. They either run away or they give up. Those 4 things happen immediately. So then we have to examine how long does it take our police to respond to any of those shooting incidents. And that, my friend, is the horrible statistic. It's 5 to 10 minutes. By the time they actually engage the shooter, it's about 12 to 15 minutes. And so this is really a horrible scenario to deal with when you determine how many people can die in in those 10 minutes. And they've done it. In fact, I'm surprised that a lot more people were not killed in these incidents.
No,
because you know the rate, how fast people can pull a trigger, or if it's an automatic, it's even worse. So this is the thing. What do we, as a community, as law enforcement, as politicians, what should we be looking at? Look at the evidence, look at the facts, look at each scenario and see what motivates the shooter to stop. And every single time, it's somebody with a gun. So how do we decrease that 10-minute time frame before the police actually get engaged with the suspect? We have somebody there that already has access to a weapon. That, my friends, is the reason we have Neighborhood Alliance PAC, because we want to tell everybody the truth. We want to increase the number of, decrease the number of people assaulted and killed and wounded. And if we respond immediately within the school or within the building where it's happening, we can decrease by 90% the people who die at such incidents. And can you just imagine a suspect being surprised by 4 or 5 teachers surrounding him or confronting him with a weapon? And I'm telling you, I don't want to ever be a part of something like that, because I watch students get shot, and what we're telling them, instead of somebody defending their lives and stopping the carnage, is we tell them to hide in the room in a corner.
Yeah.
And if the suspect is allowed in there, he shoots everybody in the corner.
I know.
And I don't want to face that anymore. I don't think it's proper. I don't think it's going to help one iota. But I can tell you, if you look at the history of all of this and the facts, you have to increase the speed at which somebody confronts the suspect with a gun.
No, I agree with you completely, Sheriff Mack. I mean, the data is very clear. You're right. It's usually the largest number of people are usually within the first minute and a half of an incident. The sooner you can get there, the more dramatically you reduce it. Looking at Texas, when there was the church shooting and the gun instructor confronted that shooter with his own AR-15, that ended that incident instantly. And we see that repeatedly. And that's probably why Parkland has armed officers now patrolling, and their recommendation was for the rest of the state to follow suit. So I agree with you completely. We only have
now one other thing. People have been. This subject is not all that new. Our PAC is new, and that we want to really press this issue across the country. So people have been wanting to know how they can help with this, and just go to our website, Neighborhood Alliance PAC. That's PAC. So neighborhoodalliancepac.com, and make a donation. Get on our mailing list. Get involved in this. Go to your local schools. Go to your local legislatures, and get involved in making sure that we can change the law where this isn't allowed at this point. And let's try a real effective self-defense methodology that's going to save the lives of our children.
No, I agree
with you. I mean, there's been 4 or 5 of these incidents where a citizen actually confronted the suspect and put an end to a lot of the killing. It's happened even in a church where an off-duty female officer did it. Then it was done at a school before where a teacher ran out to his car and got a gun.
Yeah.
Imagine how many students, and I believe that was Alabama, imagine how many students are being killed while he's chasing down his gun outside. And I'll add something else too, Michael.
Sure.
I don't really want to carry a gun at school. I carried a gun for 20 years. I don't mind carrying a gun, but I really don't want to have one on my person in the school. They're bulky. They're difficult to conceal. They get in the way. I don't want to have a student try to take one away from me, but I do want to have one that is very handy and in a very strategic location. And all the teachers who are trained must have access immediately to a weapon that is strategically placed within the school where nobody knows it's there except for us. The principal, the assistant principal, and those of us who are trained to defend the school and the kids, we're the only ones that are going to know where the gun is. And even if somebody found where the gun was, it would be locked up and secured to the point where only we can access it. And I like the locks and those that respond to your fingerprint or immediately are opened by the person who is allowed to open it. So I say let's do it that way. If somebody wants to carry it on their person, I'm not against that. If a teacher doesn't want to do this and doesn't want to be trained to defend the kids, that's fine too. But nobody's going to be forced to do it. But there's plenty of people who've been in the military, several, of course, teachers who've been in law enforcement or have been trained in firearms, or people who really want to do this and want to be trained. There's no magic in police academies or other facilities that train police. You know what? We're all citizens, and we teach citizens how to do this. And there's nothing wrong with teaching public officials and teachers how to do this and to be ready, to be prepared, and let everyone know we are not a gun-free zone. If you come here, we will shoot back.
No, I think that's an important message, and I do agree with you on all of those aspects. I think it's very important that we have to take it. We've, as you mentioned, over 22,000 gun laws exist. We've been doing the same process for the last 40 years after each of these incidents, and we had another 128 additional laws added just in the last year, and none of them are working. Let's try a new approach, and I think you have a very good answer there. I know we're out of time, and I know you're working on something, so I do thank you for breaking up that incident, the situation you have ongoing, and I hope it works out well for you. But I do want to thank you.
Well, thanks.
Go ahead.
I really appreciate being on with you, Michael. Sorry it was late, but thank you so much, and let's do it again. And again, let me give that website out. It's Neighborhood Alliance PAC.com. NeighborhoodAlliancePAC.com.
Absolutely. I've also got it on the screen, and I'll include it in the notes. And we look forward to speaking with you again soon, hopefully on much better news. Say we're defeated, but we'll definitely be in touch again. Okay?
All right. Well, thanks, Michael. See you soon.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, folks. And that was Sheriff Richard Mack talking about his work with the Neighborhood Alliance PAC, talking about his efforts and what he's seeing in the schools and how best to protect our children, how best to protect our rights, and to protect the Second Amendment, as well as the Eighth Amendment, and how all these things are all interconnected. And that's important. So I'm glad we had a chance. I know it was a little bit later than we expected, and I know he's working on a project as we were speaking, but I'm glad we had the chance to talk to him. We're going to look forward to speaking with him again soon, but we're going to take a quick break now, an actual full break, and then we'll come back and we'll go on to what I think is very interesting about what's going on in the 2020 race.
Sometimes a man is wrong. You ain't got a cheating heart. Oh, your love is true. You just gotta cheat every other part. Oh, it's gonna love this time. Oh, it's one of those times. Oh, that woman, she don't mean a thing. She just had eyes of fire in a heart so cold. One touch, lost control. Oh, it's one of those times. Oh, it's one of those times. Oh, I can't admit sometimes a man is wrong. Oh, she took 5 sips. Oh, she was gone. Oh, it's one of those times. Oh, it's one of those times.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining me back here at the No Soundbites Allowed podcast with the Exceptional Conservative Network. We're enjoying ourselves today. We're having a great time talking with everyone. I hope you're enjoying it as well. It is always phenomenal to be back here with you guys. And I want to say it again. I have one of the greatest audiences. I really do. And I also want to give my thanks to Sheriff Richard Mack for taking the time to speak with us. I know he was late because he had to deal with a situation ongoing, and I hope it's been resolved positively. But it was a great thing to hear him talk and give that insight. And why aren't we looking at the option of arming our schools? Why are we not looking at the option of empowering people to defend themselves versus depowering people by taking away their Second Amendment rights, by giving them cruel and unusual punishment with red flag legislation, when we have seen a history of over 40 years, 50 years, you can go back even further, of these gun control laws, over 22,000, as Sheriff Richard Mack mentioned, 123 since the last year. None of them have worked. We keep hearing these politicians say over and over again, well, we just need another legislation. And part of the book I'm writing, in 2015, we were talking about wait lists. Remember that? And no-fly lists. And they didn't do anything. And now you don't hear anyone talk about that at all. When was the last time you heard someone talk about a no-fly list or a waiting list? You don't hear that anymore. Why? Because it didn't work. It didn't protect anyone. It's not effective. We hear about these red flag laws. Guess what? Chicago, the state of Illinois, has red flag laws. California had red flag laws. They had the Thousand Oaks shooting. New York now has it. We've had the SAFE Act since 2013. It doesn't work. We still had the Islamberg, New York plot, where individuals, kids, they were between 16 and 20 years old, trying to build bombs, which are illegal everywhere. And the San Bernardino shooting, where they were bombs, which are illegal everywhere. The gun control laws don't stop criminals. They don't stop the deranged. They just make regular citizens less able to defend themselves. And that is, in my opinion, cruel and unusual punishment to the public. But I did promise that when we got back, we'd talk a little bit about something else, a slightly different issue. And I want to go back to the poll that I was talking about earlier. And the poll, again, was that, and it reads, and you can go to the Voss Political Commentary page on Facebook to be able to see this. It's also on our YouTube website. And it says, former Vice President Joe Biden, Beto O'Rourke, Alan Howe, and even on the local level, Councilman Conrad Taylor, each one, and so many more, apologize for being white. It's part of the gender and identity politics central to the 2020 Democratic presidential platform. Is this racist? Is this positive for America? What do you think? And as I said, we've had hundreds who have answered on that poll, who have looked at the poll, a couple, just over a dozen that have not. But I think it's very important that we understand that a lot of people are challenged to be able to answer this, that they're afraid to speak out because it's part of that PC culture that we've trained people not to speak out lest they would be ostracized. Because if you're against gun control, if you're against gender and identity politics, well, you must be some kind of racist. You're a sexist. You're a homophobe. You hate children. You hate someone or anyone. You're always accused of hate. But that's not true. No, that's not true at all. Just because you don't agree with someone else's idea, which is why we have Congress. That's why we have a Senate to discuss and work on laws together. I mean, that's just something, and I know Tina had been mentioning it earlier, that we have to look at things from a different point of view. We have to look at things and look at them for what they are. And identity and gender are not criteria. They're not qualifications. You're not qualified because you're black or you're Hispanic or you're a male or a female. You're gay or straight. Those aren't reasons. Those are divisions. Those are ways of separating you and me and giving us a reason not to be able to have a conversation. And it's not the same thing as having a difference in opinion about our politics. Like, you can be black and a Democrat, and people will assume that you're supposed to be, which is a problem, because they shouldn't assume that. They don't know. They should have a conversation to find out. But let's forget that. You could be white, and you could be a conservative, a libertarian, a a member of Antifa, Black Lives Matters. You can be a Republican or a conservative. I, as a person who is a person of color, can do the same thing. We can have a conversation about that. I do it often in my regular life, often having conversations with people about all of these things. And let's ask the question, why does that make me better? Does that make my opinions better? I mean, according to the logic that's out there right now, because I'm a person of color, I should be right. And you can't argue with me. Except I'm also a Republican and a conservative. Suddenly, well, no, that's a different category. Why does that become a category? Why are you categorizing me based on the color of my skin, which has nothing to do with the intelligence in my mind, which has nothing to do with my ability to communicate, or what I support, or why? What about my life experiences? You know, the fact that I've lived in the Soviet Union, I've lived in Moscow and Tbilisi. I've seen what socialism and communism lead to, which I wouldn't wish on anyone in the world. Doesn't that factor in? Isn't that part of the qualifications? Isn't that more important than whether or not I have a tan every day of the year? But we don't see that. And that's why we see what has happened is that, you know, Biden's out there and he's talking about white man's culture has to change. He's apologizing for the fact that he happens to be white. He's apologizing for the fact that many Americans happen to be white. Then there's also looking at what's being said. I mean, let's just look at what Bloomberg said. Mike Bloomberg, who was going to go and run, he was expected to run for the Democratic nomination for president. He stepped out, but he was talking with Vanity Fair. Can you imagine? It's Vanity Fair. When do I ever use them as a source? But he was talking with Vanity Fair. And he was talking with them about the apology tour that Joe Biden, that Beto O'Rourke, that so many members of the Democratic Party are on right now. The identity politics that is predominant in the 2020 presidential election. And at the local level, I mean, in my local area, the political leaders of tomorrow, a very radical, far left, race and identity-based organization, are looking to try and get half a dozen candidates elected based on identity and gender. Not the qualifications, not because of the individual, but because of their color and their sex. And so what Mike Bloomberg had to say about this in Vanity Fair, and the article is the Bloomberg Takes a Swipe at Beto's White Privilege Apology Tour. You can look this up for yourself. And he says in there, and I'm looking for the right, okay, he's talking in reference to his run for the 2020 election. It's just not going to happen on a national level for somebody like me, starting where I am, unless I was willing to change all of my views and go out on CNN on what CNN called an apology tour. Wow. That says a lot. Not only, I'm not surprised that it's CNN, but that he's saying that he's denied the ability to run. Whether or not he's the best qualified candidate is a different argument. But the fact that he can't run because he's not willing to apologize for being born male and white. He doesn't want to apologize because he exists. And that's something that prevents him from being able to go and have an election. He goes on, Joe Biden went out and apologized for being male, over 50, white. He apologized for one piece of legislation, which is actually a pretty good anti-crime bill, which if the liberals ever read it, most of the things they like are in this bill. That's interesting. He goes on to say, Beto, talking about Beto O'Rourke. Beto, whatever his name is, he apologized for being born. I mean, I don't like to be unkind, and a lot of people love him and say he's a smart guy. And someday, if he wins, I'd certainly support him. But there's that important part in there. Beto, whatever his name, he's apologized for being born. That is the nature of the Democratic Party today. That to be considered as a candidate, and he and Beto O'Rourke and Joe Biden, along with Bernie Sanders, are the top of the list of the candidates for the Democratic 2020 presidential race. They are the leaders of the party. And much like Tom Perez had said about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in 2018, this is the new Democratic Party, the Democratic Socialist Party, a party that believes in separating people based on color and identity, a party that believes race being racist and sexist is a positive, that to judge people solely on the color of their skin and the sex of their body and gender is a positive thing. I don't know how anyone can agree with that, but I can tell you that we have seen what the result is. And the result is that who's leading, according to a poll that was done by Politico, or rather, Politico wrote an article on the 28th, I believe, about this, March 28th. Well, they mention in here that the Democratic Party is hungry for a candidate to take on President Donald Trump. Democrats and Democratic leaners put the three Bs, Biden, Bernie, and Beto, at the top of the race, where age, race, and gender take a back seat to electability and shared views. Really? And this is Tim Malloy, who is the assistant director of Quinnipiac University. Now, as I showed you earlier, and I'll bring it back up, there is the poll he's speaking about is the Quinnipiac poll, where 84% of Democrats responded saying that race is not important. 84% noted that gender is not important. And that's not supposed to be important. Not supposed to be important. And yet, who's leading the Democratic Party race? Individuals who are apologizing for being white. People who are apologizing for their race and their gender. People who are bowing to the whole concept of identity politics, of categorizing people, that you as a person don't matter. You as the group matter. So if you're a white male like Beto, well, that's a problem. Really? Why? And I don't even think Beto's a good candidate myself. I mean, the man named, when he was in Congress, he named a building. He named a post office. His big claim to fame is he lost by 3% to Ted Cruz. And Ted Cruz lost to President Trump. That's his big claim. That makes him a leader of the Democratic Party. And the reason why he's doing so well, given that that's his background, what's his reason for leading in the polls at this time? Because he apologized for being white? Really? Are we serious? And who else is in this race? Who else is really doing well? Well, you see, who's in fourth place? Senator Kamala Harris. And then we go on to Mayor Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren, Cory Booker then comes in. So let's stop right there. So your first three choices in the Democratic Party at this moment are Beto O'Rourke, a person who is impersonating a Hispanic. He's not. Who named a post office and lost to an actual Hispanic, and that Hispanic happened to lose to President Trump. This is one of the top choices. Joe Biden, who at this moment, as news is breaking from yesterday and today, the 29th and today the 30th, a gentleman who's been accused of sexual harassment. Now, in the Democratic Party, that being accused is the same thing as being guilty. According to their rules and the way that Democrats look at it, Me Too and all that, they're looking at it might as well be true. And I admit that, Joe Biden is a gaffe machine of a nature and to a degree that's unique amongst most politicians of any party. But this is incredible. That's a leader in the Democratic Party. And then we have Bernie Sanders, the admitted socialist communist, an individual who's never held an actual job, an individual that many Democrats have told me they feel like he's sold out, which is why he now has 3 houses. Hello, socialism. Why do you need 3 houses, Bernie? This is your rules. You want to take from people to give to someone else. You have 3 houses. Shouldn't we take 2 of your houses and give it to two other individuals or families? There seems to be some kind of dichotomy here. This doesn't make sense. It doesn't match up. I don't understand the Democratic Party. How do you guys make this make sense? On one hand, you're saying, well, rich people are evil, except you have a bunch of rich people who are running for the presidency in your party. You're saying that being white is bad. The people who are leading in your party right now are white people. You're telling me that gender and identity is important, and yet it's not so often. Now, I will come back, and I do have to mention and say that I think the early polls right now aren't accurate. And I think that, even though Beto O'Rourke and Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders are all leading, I still stand by what I was saying about the choice for Democrats realistically will be either Senator Kamala Harris, Senator Elizabeth Warren, or I believe it could be Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, not Amy Klobuchar. She's just not, well, there's nothing to her really. There's no big wow about her. And she's not big on the identity politics like Senator Kirsten Gillibrand is, who is all about her claim to fame. The only thing she talks about, if you look at her tweets, the only thing that Kirsten Gillibrand talks about is the fact that she's a woman and that gender politics. Her whole entire platform is based on gender politics. Now, on the one hand, she's saying, hey, I'm the mom. I want to be the mom of America. She's a little older than moms. She would be the grandma of America, but whatever. So she wants to be seen in this as a matronly figure, but at the same time, she happens to be saying that women need to be overpowered, disproportionately powerful, and men should be subjugated. That's not a very fair, equal equity to anything. I don't understand Democrats. I don't understand the Democratic ideology. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't. And I'm more than willing to listen to, if there's a Democrat that's watching this that says, hey, maybe Mike, you just don't get it. Please, I don't get it. Please explain it to me. Contact me. Call up the show. The phone number is up there. It's 607-242-9247. Give us a call. Go ahead and type something on Facebook. Let me see your comments there. Write in or comment on the chat room for the show. Let's have that conversation. Let's see, what are you, please give me that argument and let me understand how these are positive things. That judging people solely based on the color of their skin or the sex that they're born with or that they surgically decide to assume, how does that make someone better or worse? I really, really would like to know that, because it doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't. But we are closing in on the final moments of the show. We've got about 15 minutes left. I am going to take a quick break. I know we got thrown off our usual schedule here because we were talking with, because of the late time that we were speaking with Sheriff Richard Mack. But I want to take a quick break here. Then we'll come back and we'll finish up the show. I am enjoying it. I hope you are too. I'm looking forward to seeing you after this break. All right, folks, we're back, and I thank you for joining me in the last few minutes here of the No Soundbites Allowed podcast, which is being brought to you on the Exceptional Conservative Network, and we enjoy having you with us, and it is a fun day. We're having a good time here. And I do want to thank you all for inviting me into your homes, to your cell phones, onto your iPads, wherever you may be, whether you're listening to this live or if you're listening to it taped on the podcast or YouTube or Facebook, however you may be reaching us. I want to thank you for taking the time to be here with us. You guys make it all worthwhile. I really do appreciate that. And I do want to give out another shout. That was just the Adam Ate the Apple, a local band here in the southern tier of New York. If you are in this region, please come check them out. I know them. They're a great band. I enjoy watching them on a regular basis. And so please check them out if you're in their region. So we were talking about race. We're talking about the 2020 election. what does it take to win for the nomination? What does it take to win the nomination? And I personally think that, the people who will win it, again, I think are going to be one of the three: Elizabeth Warren, Kirsten Gillibrand, or Kamala Harris. At the moment, though, the people who are leading are Beto O'Rourke. Robert O'Rourke is his real name because he's not Hispanic. And Senator Bernie Sanders, the known self-avowed socialist, and Joe Biden, who is the gaffe machine of gaffe machines in politics and happens to be under accusation of sexual harassment, which is not the first. So that's the Democratic Party. And in each of those cases, we're talking about race, we're talking about identity. And here's the thing. It leads to this path of identity and gender politics, of ranking people based on their sex, by their gender, that leads to only one thing. And we've seen it before here in the United States. We're talking about things like Jim Crow. We're talking about things like the civil rights violations that happened in America and that was fought against. Because this isn't, I can tell you, and this is an article from the Washington Times, and it reads, "Black press only. White reporters not allowed at Georgia mayoral race event." And think about this for a second. That's racist. If that read, "White press only, black reporters not allowed in Georgia mayoral race event," there would be riots in Georgia. It is just as racist when it's black only as if it were white only. Either the event is open to the press and the media, or the event is closed to the press and the media. There is no halfway about that. There is no kind of or sort of. Either it's open or it's not. And I'm 50. I still remember the tail end of the civil rights movement. I still remember the reactions of people at that time. The closed-mindedness, the isolated racism, which doesn't exist today. That level, what I saw in the 70s growing up, does not exist in America today in 2019. It does not. Not to say that there are no racists in the world, not to say that there are no racists in America. I'm not saying that. The level and the degree and the nature of the racism that existed in the 70s after the civil rights movement, and as America transitioned from a far more racist outlook to what we have today, that has shrank. Well, it was shrinking until about 2008, when suddenly there was this massive infusion of identity politics, of racial equality, equality of outcome. That is that equity, I should say. Excuse me, not equality, but equity based on the outcome of tilting the bar. And I know people want to say, "Oh, well, it's Donald Trump." No, it's not. It's not. Racism existed long before Donald Trump was ever born. And racism in America has been resolved long before Donald Trump ever existed. And you know what? Donald Trump was winning NAACP awards and speaking with every single one of the major media promoted black leaders for decades before he ever ran for president. So I don't believe that Donald Trump is the source. I do believe that CNN, MSNBC, the Democratic Party's leadership, not the same thing as rank and file Democrats, and definitely not the same thing as progressives or liberals, that they see this. They understand it. That there is a very big difference. That's why when they were asked in a poll, as we showed in earlier segments from Quinnipiac, 84% of Democrats are willing to say race and gender should not be a factor because they are not factors. They are inherent by birth. And you, in the same way that no one of color should ever be upset with being a person of color. Being white, you shouldn't be upset about that either. I listen to some of these leftists, these liberals, these progressives say, well, no, you don't understand. Because these people are evil. They've done wrong things. I'm like, wait a minute. Human beings of all colors can be evil and have been. And I don't see a reason why we need to label everyone. I don't want to be labeled. I am. People presume that I must be a Democrat because I'm black, and I'm nothing like that. That I must agree with liberal policy when I don't at all, just because of the color of my skin. And that's outrageous. If you were to you can't say, and if you were to say that all drug dealers are black, or all drug addicts are Hispanic or Asian, there would be outrage, as there should be, because that's a horrible stereotype that's not true. But if you flip it around, well, that's okay. If you say that about white people, well, that's okay. If in Georgia, if you're separating the press based on color, how is that not Jim Crow? Take out black and white. Stop using those words. You are restricting people based on their color. I don't know anyone who has survived the civil rights movement, anyone who's my age range, that could accept that you're going to separate and categorize and promote certain people based solely on the fact that they have a color or a gender, for that matter. The 70s had the equal rights movement, and women's positions in companies and corporations has improved. Women have gained so much power in politics. And I know people say it as if it doesn't exist. Like, no, they don't. Well, Kamala Harris is running for Congress. For presidency. She's a senator. Really? And no one's laughing about it. They're taking her serious. This is a serious thing. Elizabeth Warren is running. She's a serious candidate. And I mean serious in the fact that she could get the nomination. She could run. Hillary Clinton did run twice. No one takes for granted that women can run. People forget that a majority of the people in politics, I mean, we've had a huge number of women that have joined into politics and are actively involved. But yet, if you look at the media, it's like, no, but we're being suppressed. Who's suppressing you? How are you being denied? But when you have the lens of gender and identity politics on, you can't see things for what they are. And that's a shame. But we have about a minute and a half here left with you. And I've had a great 2 hours. I think it's been very informative and useful. I hope you found it to be interesting as well. Obviously, we always look in the chat room, and I know Tina was in there and a few others. Everyone got a little quiet after a while. Could be the subject matter. And not trying to scare anyone away. It's not meant to be that way. I think these are things that we need to talk about as a country, as groups of individuals. I think it's very powerful and very important. And the more we talk about them, the better that is. So let's have those conversations. Let's have those serious conversations. You know what? I have no problem if we have a woman who's leading in Congress or in the Senate or even for president, if they're qualified. If they're qualified, not because of their sex, not because of their skin, but because of what they do. And these are the conversations we need to have. That's what we do here. That's why we were talking with Sheriff Richard Mack, who I thank again for being on the program. I thank everyone who was listening in. And of course, we have just a few more moments here left on the program. So let me also mention that if you are on Facebook and watching the program, please check out our latest video. You can also go and see some of the other videos we've done that you might like. Please don't forget to subscribe. We value that massively. Please leave us your comments and your thoughts. Support and donate if you can. It makes a difference. And most of all, be well. Be well. And I look forward to seeing you again very, very soon.